Lots to talk about tonight when it comes to social issues like poker machines and obesity. So let me bring in psychologist Clare Rowe and psychiatrist Tanveer Ahmed. I feel like I should call this segment On the Couch. So as we talk about these issues, let's start off with poker machines, Clare. Big reforms announced by the Perrottet government in New South Wales today. If this happens in New South Wales, mark my words, it'll happen right around the country. That is no cash in poker machines, making it all cashless. Is that necessary? Are these a particularly insidious form of gambling?
Yeah, it is, amongst other ones, of course. And I suppose that's the way of the economy as well, right? We're all going cashless for everything. I suppose pubs and clubs will miss out on those punters that have the spare change at the end of the night. Yeah. I mean, you know, chuck in a few dollars of what you've got in your pocket. But at the end of the day, I think that it probably does put some necessary, you know, earnest on the punter, on the gambler to set the limits. And that's what they're talking about, kind of preset limits for people that they can set themselves so they don't go over. I'm all for that. I think it'd be great. I am anti and feel uncomfortable if the government is going to set those limits. I mean, I don't think it's the government's position to be able to say whether you want to throw your money away on gambling or not. But if we can make gambling a little bit easier, safer, you know, restrictive for the individual who wants to stop or restrict themselves, all for it.
But Tanveer, people gamble on the dogs, the horses, the trots, they gamble on the footy, the tennis, the cricket. They can use cash for that at the TAB or at the track. Why shouldn't all gambling then be cashless?
Look, Chris, honestly, my take is I think this... I know there was a New South Wales Crime Commission report, but I think this is partly a backlash to exactly what you've alluded to. I think gambling is much more ubiquitous with online and the internet than it has been, especially in the last 5 years. So I think there is a bit of a community concern. We're taking it out on the pokies. Now, in my field, gambling is known as a behavioural addiction. So it's not like a substance that causes a physiological change, but it's still about poor impulse control, not being able to regulate rewards. So there is something in this. And I think Perrottet's clearly seen it as a winner. But I do agree, there's actually, both men's and the clubs industry do have something to say that we don't actually know exactly how it's going to operate.
But most people are not problem gamblers, right? This is, again, where you're changing the rules for everyone because of a very small percentage of problem gamblers.
That's right. But I guess the argument might be the problem gamblers still, in terms of the revenue, make up... That's one of the big debates in this. Yeah. They make up almost a third. According to the numbers, they make up a very large portion of the total profits.
Wow.
Even though they're a tiny portion.
Another interesting aspect of this when it comes to human behaviour, Clare, is taking the cash out of it. I was involved in some poker machine reform back in South Australia eons ago. And one of the things that we did with that was to get rid of the automatic play machine. That is, you had to hit the button every time you bet $1 or whatever. So it registered with people, was the theory. Now, if people are not using cash, if it's just going on the card, does that make it easier sometimes to gamble because they're not actually seeing the money disappear?
Yeah, from a behavioural perspective, that's absolutely an argument. And I think, you know, we can argue that just in our everyday spending, right? Use your credit card, use your debit card, don't see the money, tap and go, tap and go. Everyone's spending more through those means anyway. So, yeah, I know, I agree. If you've got a kind of set amount of cash in your hand and once it's gone, that might be a time that you have to stand up, go to the ATM and withdraw more. If you don't have to do that, you know, and what stops you presetting a limit that's extraordinarily high, you could just keep tapping, you know, if that's the case on a poker machine and keep playing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let me finish. I'll tell you one thing. The nature of this addiction has changed because it's so digital. Before, you had a few seconds pulling a lever, but now it's a bit like social media or internet addiction, whereas an algorithm keeps serving you up another game. So that moment of reflection, we actually get less of it now for this problem.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be big in this New South Wales state election, no doubt, but it's going to be a big issue then around the country as well. I want to go to another issue that's big, and that is obesity, especially with kids. And we've got this push again, Clare, to hit advertising. To me, it's like politicians have to do something, have to pretend that they can solve the problems of the world. So advertising is something they can hit. But in the end, isn't it all about personal responsibility? And when it comes to kids, obviously, parental responsibility too.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think kids and food, I mean, I love this topic. It's fascinating because if you think about it, the idea of having a kid food or food that it's marketed just to children, it's only really been around since the 1950s, right? And that's when we started marketing, you know, chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs or monkeys on the front of cereal packets, you know, to children as consumers. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, parents are responsible for what they, you know, purchase and what's in their cupboards. And I've got a 4 and 6 year old. I know pest to power. You know, I'm not saying it's easy. And in fact, you know, as far as advertisements go, I often find, you know, that my kids are actually just seeing it more at the front counter. I can't pay for anything these days without it being right there every single time I go shopping. But at the end of the day, it's hard, I know, but it is parental responsibility. And I thought about this and thought, can you imagine the governmental departments that will need to be set up? You know, more public servants to monitor this, decide what's healthy, what's not healthy,
what's good,
all of that stuff.
Is a Subway sandwich fast food or a healthy sandwich? You know, I was in the happy position there for a while when my youngest boy is only about 3 or 4, and he thought the only golden arches were at Yass. So the only time he asked for Macca's is when we were driving to Adelaide or something. But then he cottoned on that they're everywhere. But how do we do it? Shouldn't we just deal with this the way normal families and people deal with it? We know there's too much obesity around, but the idea is to be sensible, not just about food, but about exercise as well.
Look, I guess the premise is that families where they do struggle, you know, it could be broken families, it could be messy environments. Can we set up a thing where there's certain behavioural interventions, a bit like cashless gambling, so there's definitely a bit of paternalism. Now, the studies, some of the key British studies on this show the potential change is very small, and even that is hotly contested because some of the assumptions made in this research was quite questionable. So then the question is, for a potential very tiny improvement, you know, advertising a pretty small part of this problem, is it worth the impost it causes on business? And many would say no.
You just put all the fast food stores on the top of a hill and people have to walk a big long walk to get it and a big long walk again.
They'll just call Uber, mate. Uber Eats.
Exactly. Just briefly, I know neither of you really want to talk about this, but there's a shocking shark attack fatality in Perth on the weekend. We keep hearing about phobias and people not wanting to go into the water but sharks, they're real attacks. It's a very real fear. People have to be sensible and rational about how they deal with this, not pretend it's not a real fear, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tragic. It's been a young person has lost their life. It is a reality of living in this country. And, you know, when we talk about putting in drum lines and you know, we can't put a net around every waterway and around the country. I mean, the government is not there to save everyone from every action, and it's awful. And I'm all for putting up warnings, you know, of bull sharks, and all for warning people about entering waterways. But it's a reality that we live with.
It sure is. Thanks for joining us, Claire, Tanvir.